There we go. And we're live. Hello,
All
everybody. Let's make sure. Let me refresh the page, make sure that we're actually live. Because for some reason my YouTube page is not showing that. Come on. Okay. Says we're live, but nobody's watching. Great. That sucks.
I don't know. The live stream's not even showing up in my subscription feed at the moment. They usually show up towards the top.
Okay, now it says we've got 2 watching.
Oh,
those 2 are us.
I'm not even watching yet. It's not showing up in my feed.
Well, okay. So we got somebody commenting already. I have no idea how to say that name. Wozewodigie. It's unlisted? Son of a gun.
Oof. Well, that explains that. Yeah, it's not showing up even when I go to your channel page. Must be.
It's unlisted, yeah. Hold on. It went with my default. I set this up while I was...
Then who's finding it if it's unlisted?
Because if I posted it up on Twitter and everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I just published it. It'll go out. Hopefully people will see it.
Yep, it's showing up on mine.
So, all right. So first things first, I want to explain why I didn't put to my viewers why I didn't put up a video this week. In case you didn't see it on social media or pinned in the last video, I went to a conference, kind of the biggest conference I will go to. It's Western Historical Association, WHA. Like I literally bumped elbows with Patricia Limerick, so that was kind of cool. So I was in San Antonio for the week and just totally busy. I'm like a week behind on YouTube videos alone. So that's why there was no video, but we're talking about the video last week. And with us today is Grant, the Casual Historian. Be sure to check his video out. It's linked in the description. But we're going to talk about the videos that came out and do some live Q&A stuff.
All right.
So Grant, what was the most overarching comment that you want to address?
See, well, I think there's this one that or no, not this one. There's this basic idea that comes up where in the video I expressed the idea that Lutheranism is very conservative and it's well, everything basically I say, but some people are construing that to meaning politically conservative. And although it has resulted in political conservatism, what I could have emphasized better in the video is that it is theologically conservative. It is just, this is the text, the scripture, that is what you base your decisions on, not all this extraneous revelations and whatnot.
And a lot of them are just like construing political conservative with theologically conservative, but it's not like never the twain shall meet. They are interlinked in significant ways.
Oh yeah. That's like, at least in the United States until the 20th century, Lutherans were probably just about the most conservative, politically conservative Christian denomination in the United States. I mean, they were one of the ones that, didn't have a problem with slavery. For example, that's been a shadow hanging over them, or at least that's the Missouri Synod. Lutherans were not against slavery, though I do think that's because the president of the Synod at that time is suspected to have been a Confederate sympathizer. There's no hard evidence for it, but it's just a lot of circumstantial stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unlike pretty much the biggest Protestant churches at the time, Lutherans didn't split over slavery. You know, you had the Baptists, the Methodists; those were the biggest denominations, and yet they did not. The Lutherans did not split.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, a key person in the Methodist split was Woodrow Wilson's father. So,
yeah.
and can you guess which side he was on?
Yeah. Well, there were splits within Lutheranism even before then, but it wasn't about slavery. In fact, it's a split that goes back to back when Luther was alive. That is, the biggest split then was the Augsburg Confessions. And that's a split that Lutherans are still having to this day. It's why, like, say, members of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod will not allow anyone to receive communion in their church who is not a congregant in a church that recognizes the Augsburg Confessions.
So can you explain what that is? Because I actually don't know.
Yeah, okay. So during the the wars of religion after the Reformation started, there was a attempt to bring some kind of peace to the Holy Roman Empire. And so Martin Luther originally wrote out this thing called the Augsburg Confessions, basically the principles of what these Lutherans believed. And the idea of it was, it's like, okay, these are the religious principles Lutherans have. Hopefully, if they are not objectionable to the Catholic rulers currently in the Holy Roman Empire, they will allow us to keep practicing our religion the way as we see fit. And the Holy Roman Emperor at the time accepted the Augsburg Confession. Basically, this is our confession of belief. And so Lutherans and any others who accepted the Augsburg Confession became known as confessional Lutherans, while those who did not are usually referred to as missional Lutherans. What the missional means, I can't say. I haven't gone that deep into it. But confessional Lutherans are ones that hold to the Augsburg Confession. And so you have more conservative Lutheran denominations tend to follow the Augsburg Confession. And so if your particular denomination adheres to the Augsburg Confession, then you can get communion in our church. But if you don't, we don't allow it because you don't share our confession of faith.
Huh.
So, like, a Catholic couldn't walk into a Lutheran church and receive communion. And likewise, a Lutheran, or at least a Missouri Synod Lutheran who is faithfully following his religion, wouldn't go into a Catholic church to receive communion.
Missional Lutherans can do
missional Lutherans are just ones that have not signed on to the Augsburg Confession,
but they can do Catholic.
They could do Catholic communion if they've engaged in the right ecumenical agreements with them. It's like, basically, for confessional Lutherans,
is this like Vatican II stuff, or is this something going way back?
This is something going way back, and also in the present. There are, like, say, lots of Lutheran churches in Europe have engaged in ecumenical efforts with Catholic churches in Europe, and so they will often allow, Lutherans could go receive a communion in a Catholic church, and Catholics could receive communion in a Lutheran church, but that's only in the ones that have agreed to that. For confessional Lutherans, however, most of them do not make that sort of jump. Confessional Lutherans usually won't go to a Catholic church to receive communion, and vice versa. Now, of course, they don't have a guy standing up at the altar with a little scanner thing saying, "Oh, we can detect that you're not confessional," and just kick you out. No, that doesn't happen. But it's like many things, like it's the honor system, essentially.
Yeah, I know firsthand. I don't know whether or not what synod it was a part of, but in basic training, I went. You had the opportunity to go to church on Sunday, and you know, that meant that you weren't in the barracks and having to do work. So, because, you know, whatever the Bible says, the army doesn't care. You work on Sundays. But so I would go to like other churches and remember I like started off from the UU side. I was like completely didn't have any real religion. But they and like an appreciation for other religions and all that. So my goal was what's going to spend the most time outside the barracks, and you know, like some of these things had cookies which you weren't allowed to eat unless you were going to church. And so I actually ended up on Lutherans. That's the one that I consistently went to, because it was just I was gone for 2.5 hours, which was a huge amount of time. Because like if you went to the Catholic thing, first of all, you could just walk there, and it was, well, you'd walk to the Lutheran thing too, but you know, in the army they think that walking distance is 5 miles. But the Catholic one was like just down the road, and so like you get done with mass and you come straight back, so it was like freaking an hour. Unless you were going to confessional, but they wanted like actual Catholics to do confessional. Plus you had to wake up early for that, and like waking up early for any reason is bad. and mind you, waking up early in the army is not waking up at like 7. Waking up early in basic training is waking up at 2. You're waking up at like 4 every day anyways. So like I ended up going to the Lutheran church there for probably about 2 months.
Yeah, it's say 2.5 hours, like depending on how exactly long travel time was. That sounds unusual for most Lutheran services.
Oh, it's the walking back and forth.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, yeah, otherwise Lutheran services are fairly quick. Catholic services, of course, are even quicker because they have a lot more services during the day than most other denominations do. You know, they're shuffling them in every 45 minutes. If you really wanted one that got you out of barracks for a long time, you'd want to go to a Mormon church. Oh, God, it's like 3 hours of stuff every Sunday. And I'm thinking, like, 3 hours? If you guys can't get it done in an hour, your God's not powerful enough.
And I think there's also an incentive to make it longer. And, you know, there's also kind of like a social thing afterwards where, like, they let us have cookies. I like David Dillon says it's a LARP cult. We have chocolate. But it was it also had communion, and you know, I actually like did communion and everything, so obviously I'm not a Lutheran. But
yeah,
I don't know if they knew that or if they even cared.
Well, it's the honor system with most churches. Like, we assume you're not going to violate our rules out of malice.
Yeah, although there is malice in there. It's just not malice towards the church. It's malice towards the army.
Yeah. So back to one of the questions we were getting from the comments of our videos. Like the one I got first that I talked about the liberal or conservative Lutheran ideas. Someone called Rava said, as a German Lutheran, it was very interesting to see you explain how the same denomination developed on the other side of the pond. That sounds a little British, but okay. It is interesting to spot the small differences between Lutheranism in the US and in Germany. The sola scriptura thing isn't really present in Lutheran life and services, etc. And it's not actually as conservative as its US American branch seems to be. Obviously, there are always exceptions. And it's something I was fairly familiar with, at least. You know, like the Lutheran churches in Europe are far more likely to engage in ecumenism than Lutheran churches in America are, or at least conservative Lutherans in America are. Though it's funny that the liberal branch of Lutheranism in the U.S. is the bigger branch, at least at the moment, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Though it is shrinking at a faster rate, which I remember not too long ago, Religion for Breakfast did put out a video about where it talked about how, the more conservative branches of religions are surviving or having a better chance of surviving in the modern age than the liberal ones are.
Yeah. Although I think he was talking, I know which episode you're referring to, and he had something about like that wouldn't exactly apply to Lutheranism when he was talking about it. He was talking something about like millenarianism or something along those lines. I don't remember the episode, otherwise I'd just look it up. But
yeah,
there is also this whole thing of, in general, religion is shrinking. I mean, I'm kind of a classic example of that. That like I am a what is that called? A lapsed Unitarian. Even though like Unitarians in general don't today don't really have a specific religion. They're just a loose conglomeration of many. I am no longer attending church. I stopped attending as soon as I was no longer forced to.
Yeah.
And that goes for a lot of people. A lot of people do end up retaining a lot of their beliefs. There's a lot of lapsed Catholics, or I've heard it Easter Catholics, where they only go on like Easter Sunday.
Yeah, there are Easter versions of every Christian denomination. It's a lot fuller at Easter and Christmas.
Yeah, and but even there, that speaks to a general declension of religion, at least in America. And from what I read, it's actually a lot worse in Europe. There's a lot more atheism, and there's a lot more. I mean, at least what I am, agnostic. There's a lot more of that, steadily pervading. And undermining religion of all denominations. And the only way that it seems that religions can manage to hold on to that membership is to basically brace against the tide of atheism and agnosticism, is to clamp down. Although I saw in one of the comments that that was there on your page was that the one person was talking about they were from the more liberal Lutheran church, and he was saying like and the Missouri Synod still believes that like humans were riding dinosaurs.
Yeah. I can say I've never met someone who actually believes that. And the thing is that that's another thing that whole thing has to do with, partly the age of the earth, of which the Missouri Synod Lutherans have not taken a position on that because the Bible doesn't. So we're not going to pretend to know how old the earth or the universe is, at least not based on a text that doesn't give that answer.
Well, there's the old thing of God created it in 7 days, and they're trying to say literally 7 days, even though it's like, well, if he created light on the first day, that means there was no sun. So how long was that first day if you literally don't have a sun to count it? Also, you created light on the first day. I don't remember Genesis that well, but like it's like the second day or the third day that he creates heaven and earth, and that means that literally those days, what we count as a day, is not the same as what the Bible does. But there was an old calculation done in the early 19th century. I don't remember the priest's name, But he calculated from all of the, Adam beget so and so and begat,
Yeah.
and calculated that the creation of the Earth was exactly 4003 BC. And I am a member of a group called Eclampus Vitus, and so as a joke, we say that our creation was 4004 BC.
Yeah, I know.
Adam was the original member.
Yeah, I know. Traditionally speaking, a lot of denominations get their age of the world from rabbinic sources. Actually, like a lot of stuff we borrow from rabbinic sources. Like we always base when Easter is going to be on the Jewish calendar. That's why it keeps moving around every year. Mm-hmm. And then we also often many churches will accept the number the rabbis give for the age of the earth. And right now, I think their estimate is around like 6,000 ish years. That's the traditional number.
6,000 years, not 6,000 BC.
Yeah, no, it's around 6,000 years. So that would be around 4,000 ish BC.
Yeah,
we're counting back. So that's at least the traditional number, but most Lutheran churches don't.
Pastor's students. Mm-hmm. By the way, this was an American who calculated, an American Catholic who calculated this at Princeton or something along those lines. Whatever college was mainly Catholic at the time.
That would have been well, the Catholic universities were all Jesuits.
Yeah, he was definitely of an order. I don't know if he was the Order of Jesus, but but one of his students, a woman, in fact, actually, and I don't remember her name either, calculated it to the month. So it was like October, like mid-October of 4004 BC. 4003.
Yeah. The numbers.
We actually have written sources from before 4003 BC, so that whole thing gets thrown out. It's like it's literally like this guy owed me 4 bushels of hay or something along those lines. Not hay, but wheat. And like that's how writing began, but we have writing from before 4004. So
yeah. Well, what can I say? Usual position is, the Bible doesn't care how old the earth is. Why should we?
Yeah, and like that is some advanced reading to generate a date like that. I mean, like I don't even understand how you calculate from those begets, because it's not like you're just adding, Adam beget so and so lived for X number of years, so you just add those two together. It's not. You don't know when they were born.
Yeah, the years overlap. What can I say? It's hard to calculate that.
Yeah. So I don't know how that calculation went. But it was it's funny how often you will find people trying to use the Bible to calculate those kinds of things. You'll even see historians trying to use the Bible to especially the Old Testament, to look into things like the Assyrian Empire. There's an excellent podcast by, I'm forgetting his name. He runs Hardcore History.
Dan Carlin.
Yeah, Dan Carlin. Talking about the Assyrians and the Babylonians and that. And he's a big fan of Will and Ariel Durant in that one. He uses them extensively. But something that the Durants did, and he subsequently does, is rely heavily on the Bible to tell certain aspects of the story. And while there's certain use in that, when you start trying to calculate years and calculate the number of dead from a battle or something along those lines from the Bible, you're going wrong.
Yeah, that's... I always get too suspicious when I hear very specific numbers attributed to anything that far in the past. It's like they didn't know how much they were losing. And plus, there's always just the incentive of make your enemy sound as big as possible so that way your victory sounds even greater.
Yeah. Or the opposite, where you're just, it's like, you know, where it sounds like your enemy is this weak, pitiful thing that needs to be conquered. And we see that a lot in literature about the Indian Wars.
Yeah. So for a second, back to that point you're making about the spread of agnosticism and atheism in Europe and the declining religiosity thereof. I know, like, one of the commenters I got, they calls himself Democratic People's Republic of Denmark or something. You know, Lutheranism isn't that conservative. Here in Denmark, most people are Lutheran, but also social democrats or some kind of liberal. Also people like me who is a Lutheran, but also Marxist-Leninist. And my response to that is, yes, the Scandinavian countries have lots of people who are members of their national Lutheran churches. But when you also look at, say, Pew Research Center polling, they find that in Denmark, only about 28% of people in Denmark actually firmly believe there is a God. And so it's like, sure, yeah, people who call themselves Lutherans can be Marxists, but, you know, you can be a member of your national church and not even believe in God. And it's even bigger.
That's one of those things that a lot of, I mean, you'll see this with atheists on the internet a lot, is that they'll quote those kinds of statistics and be like, there's no use for churches whatsoever now. And it's like, well, I think a lot of those people who might very well be atheists, you know, that like, let's say 20%, just throwing out a number, that are going to church, but are definitely atheists. You know, whether or not they believe, they're not there for the belief system. You know, churches still hold a communal power, and that communal power is you know, something that we all seek. You know, I think it's Aristotle who said that man is the social animal. And the even with Marx and that, he thought that, you know, he talks about like the opiate of the masses and that, and atheists will often use that as a thing to say like we need to get rid of church, but Marx wasn't proposing getting rid of churches. He was proposing replacing them with something else. And there's been this long debate about like, what do we replace churches with? And then you'll also see people talking about like, there's all this stuff now talking about like Star Wars as a new religion. And like, I mean, obviously there's the joking, like, I identify as Jedi, but like, that's obviously a joke. But but analyzing how like canon, I think Religion for Breakfast did this actually. He talked about like how Star Wars can be seen as like a canon, and arguments over what deserves to be in it and what doesn't, and like how what's faithful, what's not, and all that kind of stuff is assembling a canon, a Bible.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing right now is sort of, I don't think the idea of religion is going to go away, but I think it's going to be replaced with non-theistic religion. And there's some who sort of view different ideologies that are around now. It's like almost, you see the people following different ideologies with a religious kind of devotion. And it's like, well, you sound exactly like the religious idiots you mock, except just replace God with X. Yeah, like for a long time, I know in more conservative political circles, they looked at like environmentalism at some points as being religious in a way, where they've replaced God with the earth, or they could literally just use Gaia.
Well, it's like the in the UU principles, it's like the last one is like, and we believe in the inherent interconnectedness of all existence or something like that. That's basically saying like we believe in a God, but it's like putting it in this like abstract non-theist, atheist. I mean, there's actually a lot of that was one of the comments that was all over the place, was like, UU sound like they're almost atheist now. It's like, well, there's a lot of UU atheists. And because I mean, it's open to everyone. That's the whole point. And it's doesn't have a clear theology, and so you'll get like Wiccans, you'll get lapsed Mormons. Actually, there, at my place, there was a lot of excommunicated Mormons because, mind you, I'm forgetting the name of the court case, Obergefell v. Hodges or whatever. Which I believe, if I remember correctly, one of the two was a UU. But the one of the two trying to sue for marriage, and had been married in a UU church. But the obviously gay marriage was not legal in Nevada at the time, and there were a lot of gay folk who were like former Mormons or had been ostracized from their family when they came out of the closet, and that at my church. That was a prominent part of my church. In fact, the leader of the religious education program, Kevo, Kevin, I don't know his last name, and he's gone now, by the way, but he was one of these folks, and he was running the religious education program. I mean, he was so gay, his favorite color was purple. And he made it known. But the point is that UUs don't have that, but their whole idea is it's still a congregation. And that's the power of religion. And so, like, if you have Star Wars clubs, or you have, Trek cons or anything along those lines, that could be seen as another form of community based around some sort of shared ideal. And even though it's based on something that is known to be fiction, it's still kind of performing the same duties as religion.
Yeah, it's like, from the research I've done, in many Scandinavian countries where they still have national churches, though I think Sweden officially adopted freedom of religion, or I guess officially adopted separation of church and state in 2000. But even there, like Sweden, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Sweden was their national church.
Still have a monarchy?
Sweden does. In fact, I think all the Scandinavians except for Finland.
Yeah, I thought the monarchy was like the reason why there was
there, and I'm assuming that's what it was. But I know in Sweden, I think in the year 2000, they finally, had official separation of church and state. But even there, in Sweden, where a country is like 89% registered as atheist, over 70% of the country is part of the their National Lutheran Church, or the formerly National Lutheran Church there. And so in Scandinavian countries, Lutheran churches have sort of transformed into becoming more social institutions. It's like you still send your kid to catechism classes, you still get baptized at the local church just because it's part of the culture, rather than any kind of spiritual or theological significance.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, I've been baptized in a number of different religions, mostly because I don't care. How Mormons want everyone to be baptized, and they actually have like posthumous baptism.
That stuff. You'll find a lot of sketchy videos on YouTube if you look that stuff up.
Well, I mean, how they do posthumous baptism, and like, if you ever go and see the way they do this, is that they have like a bunch of people lined up, and then they come up and like on the screen above the thing that they walk through, it just says like the person's name that they're taking on, and they like chant the name as they go through. And it's actually kind of silly, but
I think the clips I saw were probably ones being done in Salt Lake City at the big temple with like a big baptismal font that looks like it's being held up by golden calves or something.
Wow. The one in Vegas is just, it looks like a jacuzzi with stairs going into and out of it.
That sounds more Vegas-y.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also not Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
The Mormonism, the Scientology of Christianity. I wouldn't want to put it on that level, man. The fact is, well, there were definitely some crazy trends in Mormonism, especially until the 1870s. You can't exactly say that wasn't the case for any other religion beginning. And if you read into like some of the things that Gnostics got up to, it's just like, what the hell?
Yeah, well, you know, super Greek.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially like polygamy was in fact, I was just reading, not reading, at WHA, there was a session talking about does Reconstruction apply to the West, and they were specifically talking about Mormons, because Lincoln liked to use the phrase the dual relics of barbarism, slavery and polygamy, yeah. And a lot of travel writers in that would visit the Mormons in Utah and write about them as like the ancient patriarchs. Like this was an accepted thing, an accepted term. Patriarchy today means a very different thing, but at that point, patriarchy was referring to, these guys who had multiple wives in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be a weird thing among Christian groups, especially in the last couple hundred years, where so many of them try to adopt sort of many of the trappings of the Old Testament patriarchs. Like, we're going to be as much like the biblical Israelites as possible. That'll make us closer to Jesus. So we need multiple wives. Like, I think David Koresh did some of that stuff as well.
Oh, he did a lot more than that. He straight up like said that all men in his cult had to be celibate while he had sex with all the women.
Yeah, well, he's trying to be like King David or maybe Solomon.
No, he actually called himself David. Like David Koresh is his pseudonym. Because like Koresh means like first Lamb of God or something like that, and David is just referring to the biblical David. I don't remember his actual name, but like, he was doing that to open the first seal. I had to do a lot of research on this because of that video I put out a little while ago. And like, but he justified everything he did with the Bible.
Yeah. So it's that thing that some of these groups do. Is like, I guess it's kind of a warning sign where if you see a new religious movement that wants to be as much like the Israelites as possible, it's like, that's something you might want to keep an eye on just in case. They can do some weird things sometimes. They always bring back polygamy for some reason.
Yeah. Well, my mother actually, she's a sociologist, and she did a thing a few years ago where she actually went and studied a polygamous colony, Mormon polygamous colony, because those actually still exist. They are not affiliated with the Latter-day Saints.
Oh yeah, they've had their own.
Actually, that was a comment on my video, was that somebody said like we prefer the term LDS. But that's actually only referring to one branch of Mormonism. Mormonism has many branches, especially those who followed Joseph Smith's son. And that whole break off, rather than following Brigham Young. And then there was the break off from the revelation that polygamy was no longer okay. Because the Mormon Church works by revelations, that like its leader just gets a revelation and
the leader is a prophet. They usually go by the term president now, but formally within the church, I think the proper term is prophet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they referred to everyone who was a member as a saint. So, and like, what's the next level above saint? But there is that whole, you know, the prophet can reveal new. Can have revelations.
It's super convenient for modernizing a religion. Like God suddenly tells me polygamy is wrong. God suddenly told me that black people are okay now.
That's another one that I'm surprised I haven't actually gotten a lot of hate comments on. Was I talked about that in the sports protest episode, and like that was such a big problem in the 1960s, to the point that I think the revelation came in 1975.
I think 75 or 78. I think may have been.
It was really late.
Yeah, like late and then like in the late 70s, early 80s, you started seeing all these commercials from the Church of Latter-day Saints all over the place, and apparently they did a big targeting of inner cities.
Well, they oftentimes the standard story goes that I'm forgetting the name of the sports team because I don't really like sports at all, but it was a football team that boycotted a game with BYU, and that turned into a big deal. And you know, you got all your ultra conservatives coming out and going like, how dare they? They're being paid to do that. Well, no, it's a college team. They're not being paid by regulation, so screw you. But it's also like, look, if they're willing to face the consequences of their protest, then screw you. And that's the often regarded as the reason that what pushed the church into the new revelation.
Yeah, well, that seems to be a pattern for them. We need politically to cover ourselves for something, so suddenly things are different now, which is one.
They did that with gay people as well. Although they're still anti-trans, but they're no longer anti-gay and lesbian.
Mormon Church, are you saying? Or I think you're cut out for a second there. Mormon. I haven't heard anything about them changing.
They don't excommunicate you if you come out of the closet anymore.
Oh, okay, that much. Yeah, I think they probably still view the act as a sin, but yeah,
they do. But you know, it's a bit of a difference when you're just condemned versus actually ostracized from the community.
Yeah.
And with Mormons, like excommunication, at least and when I was growing up, like excommunication was a big deal. Like your family was expected to never talk to you again. Your neighborhood, like if you were known to be excommunicated, you probably would have trouble getting food at the grocery store. Like Vaughn's and that obviously couldn't. You know, big chains couldn't do it, but if it's a mom and pop shop, and they know that you're excommunicated, they are obligated by the church not to sell you food.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something far more with more sort of insular religious groups like the Mormons are, or at least they're in this weird position where they are culturally very insular, but they're trying to expand outward at the same time. It's this weird, I guess, internal clash they might be having or must be having.
Yeah, well, I think it's also there's been a lot of pushback on that, and it's just not politically. You are politically liable if you're pulling that kind of crap now, and like you can't fall back on, well, it's my religion anymore. Especially when you expand it to such a community wide thing, and this was actually a big issue with the Mormon Church in the 19th century. But then, as soon as the whole polygamy thing went away, the government kind of stepped away with their pressure, because there was a I'm forgetting the name of it, and I should remember the name of the act. But
the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act.
Yes, and that was heavily pushed by the federal government, and actually the father of one of my professors, Larry D. Ball, not my professor's Durwood Ball, but like Larry D. Ball, his father wrote like Western Marshals and Desert Lawmen, two books about marshals in Arizona and New Mexico, and the other book is about sheriffs in Arizona and New Mexico. And a lot of that is talking about how the Morrill Act was enforced, and how there was this like community pushback by Mormons, and that the federal government would often step in and be like, no, screw you. You're not in Utah anymore. If you don't like it, go back to Utah. And they even try to push it on Utah, but obviously that didn't work.
Yeah. I think, if I recall correctly, I think the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act may have actually been the first actual federal law regarding marriage at all, before like the Federal Revenue Act of 1913. It's like, because I think before the Federal Revenue Act of 1913, there wasn't any kind of recognition of marriage at the federal level, aside from the Anti-Bigamy Act.
Yeah. Well, there was an act pushed by Lincoln, actually, that was outlawing that. There was also some administrative moves, because actually polygamy was illegal in the United States pretty much the entire time, but the Morrill Act was about enforcement. Because you could claim that, oh, they're not my wives, they're just cohabitating. And one of the offshoots was that adultery was made illegal, and that was kind of a problem, especially considering how adulterous our government officials often are. So enforcing that becomes difficult when they have diplomatic immunity. You try to tell Ben Franklin not to be adulterous, and you're going the wrong way, man.
well, when you're joining a club called the Hellfire Club, I think there's certain standards you're pretty lax on.
And I mean, like, it's just also our country is founded on like womanizers like Franklin. I actually have his autobiography sitting over there, and it's assigned in a class that I'm GAing for. And the main point is, like, this is the foundation of the American character. This professor, Dr. Hutton, Paul Hutton, is fairly orthodox historian, I'd say. So he's often about like exceptionalism and the American character, like that. I'm not disparaging him, but he takes that kind of thing in stride. But so the reason why he assigns it for that class is that like he says that Franklin is the foundation of the American character, and I mean, Franklin not only was a womanizer. He was a boastful womanizer, you know?
Well, what can I say? Debt for a cap. Ladies love it.
Yeah, it actually almost became a diplomatic issue in France because he was getting with so many women. But you know, he ended up cementing the alliance there anyways, so obviously it worked out. Was Wilson a womanizer? He went through wives pretty quickly, I'll say that. But there was no allegations of cheating or anything like that, no.
See, what the line I heard about him at Versailles, you know, it's like the one man to bring a Bible to a poker game.
He was a prude for sure. Like, so there's this really famous confrontation between Wilson and something Chandler, a black activist. Forgetting his first name, like Charles Chandler or Stephen.
Sounds familiar. I couldn't say at the top of my head.
Yeah. But this guy actually like met with Wilson in the White House, and during this meeting, we're talking like 1915 or something like this, like actually right before Birth of a Nation. And this guy is saying like, you need to stop this segregation stuff. You are hurting the black community. You are tarnishing your reputation. And then what really set Wilson off was that he said, this is antithetical to American ideals. And Wilson instantly went off on this tirade about like, you know, what American ideals are and how how we're actually helping the black man by segregating him. And it's like, he was a pedant through and through, but like of the worst sort. So like, yeah, I don't think he would be a womanizer. I don't think he would have been able to deal with the dissonance of going and being an adulterer on the down low. He'd do it in the open.
Yeah. So what are some of the comments you had for your video we're looking at here?
I think the main one on mine is about whether or not a lot of people are saying that Unitarians are not Christian. And to an extent, I would actually agree. Especially now. Unitarians are... I mean, I remember having sermons by our pastor who would literally give like anti-Christian sermons at a place where right next to him is a chalice, which is a Christian symbol. Like Unitarians have a really hard time coming to terms with that sometimes, where it's like, yeah, your church is still technically a Christian church. And I think that's actually why the UUA changed their symbol to just the two U's with the flame, just to avoid that chalice symbol. Even though it's still a chalice, they just took away the stem. And the stem is supposed to, the flame itself is supposed to represent the head of the cross. That's the whole point, is it's that. You have the bowl, the stem, and the head. But actually, the Unitarians don't believe in the Holy Ghost, so.
Yeah. Well, it's a fairly common belief amongst particularly evangelical Protestants. I know, and once again, I think we said this a little before we started it, before we went live, how like there are certain groups that even more people would recognize as being Christians that many evangelical Protestants do not. Like the Mormons are an example that are commonly said to not be Christians. In some cases, they get called a cult. And I know growing up, my father often said, and my father was always a member of our church choir, and in reference to the the Mormon Holy Tabernacle Choir, he said, that's one hell of a choir going to hell.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the Mormons have an entire extra Bible, and like it has like it's actually mostly about Jesus. It's actually trying to say that like Jesus came to America.
Like,
just
yeah.
Okay,
Book,
but the difference being is that they are adding substantial text, which is, I guess, allowed by the. It's not like the Quran where the literal last line is something like "There shall be nothing beyond this" in text.
Well, actually, for the Bible, there actually is in the Book of Revelation saying, said that this text shall not be. There is something similar to that in, I think, the Book of Revelation, where it said, no additional information shall be added. These are the last, divine revelations and whatnot. Now, Mormons have interpreted that to say, oh, that's only talking about the Book of Revelation itself, not the entirety of the Bible. So that's how some have justified that, and I think that's how the Catholic Church has justified similar things.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, for instance, catechisms are could be interpreted as further text, even though it's more about like what our theology is. But considering oftentimes catechisms are printed with Bibles, that would be so there are further texts in like in Islam, for instance. There's I'm not going to remember any of that, but like basically they took, there's a lot of like collections of supposed sayings from the prophet. There's a whole
they're called the hadiths.
Yeah, the hadiths, and that could be interpreted as further text. And so there's a lot of ways of kind of like going around it, but like the main thing with like Muslims, you cannot add like the hadiths to the Quran. That would be sacrilege. But like adding the catechism isn't in that. And then there's also the fact that a lot of versions of the Bible have different numbers of books. The Catholics have the most, but Protestants have whittled away little pieces of it that don't quite fit for them.
Well, the answer for that is the standard Protestant Bible you'll find has 66 books in it, like 27 in the New Testament, 39 in the Old. Well, Catholics use a different translation from different sets of texts that are commonly it's the Septuagint, the old Greek text when they were all translated, and they usually have 7 additional books. Like that's where you have the Maccabees and other books that you won't find in a Protestant Bible, often referred to as the Deuterocanon, as in the lesser canon.
Yes, that's and there's also one in the New Testament that is eliminated.
Not from. I don't think either church uses.
In King James, I believe there's one from the New Testament that's eliminated.
I can't think of which one it'd be.
I know go grab the Bibles, but that's got a lot of work to try to look at.
It's like I know Luther played around with getting rid of the Book of Revelation, but he eventually just left it in.
The Book of Revelation was actually one of the most contested books of the canon. That a lot of people didn't want that in, and we actually have a pretty good record of this since the church kept those records, even though it's like, why would you want to keep all the dissonant voices? But the just goes to show like how good of a record it is. The fact is that the canon was contested all the way until its actual finalization, and then it was contested 1,000 years later. So, and
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe we'll see more groups trying to eliminate stuff from it now. And
Yeah,
you can say that Mormons are just contesting the canon.
Yeah, though actually, in terms of which church actually has the most books, it's not the Catholics. See, the Eastern Orthodox Church doesn't have a set convention on what books will be in their canon. So most of them have the same 73 books the Catholic Bible has, but some of them have up to as many about 5 or 6 additional books beyond that. So some are pushing into the high 70s, low 80s, but since they don't have a set convention on it, it's up to each individual congregation or grouping of congregations.
Well, I mean, another weird thing about like Unitarians, for instance, is that Unitarians weren't one big organization. As I talked in the video, it's like it wasn't an organization until 1825, and even then, like the person who basically like was the inspiration to the organization did not join, and so neither did his congregation. And yeah, the biggest congregation in Boston. So which was a Unitarian stronghold. Like for decades, Unitarianism was the default religion in Boston. And not by a small margin either. We're talking well above half of churches were Unitarian for most of the postbellum period. Of course, the problem is defining what Unitarianism is, and like, are all Congregationalist Unitarians? No. So at what point do you choose? Like, do they believe in Arianism? Are there Arminians? Are there, there's all these forms. And that's where a lot of these kinds of weird splits in terms of like what counts as canon comes from. So like you get one congregation who has a leader who says, I don't like Maccabees, and suddenly you have some offshoot that doesn't have it. And that's why it's so fragmented until you get these bigger organizations that manage to monopolize power.
So yeah, I'm curious. A while ago, I listened to a series of the Great Courses lectures on the history of Judaism, and in it, they talked about at some point around the turn of the 20th century, where there was a Jewish denomination that contemplated just uniting with the Unitarians, saying, like, well, our theologies are so similar at this point, why bother be separate? Did you come across anything like that in your research for your video?
Okay, say that again.
Basically, in the late 19th century, there were some Jewish congregations who contemplated actually sort of basically just becoming Unitarians, basically merging with Unitarians because their theologies at that point were so similar, not recognizing the divinity of Christ, all these other little nuances and whatnot.
Well, I mean, the divinity of Christ is actually part of the whole Unitarian controversy of the early 19th century, is that that was heavily debated. Is Christ a demigod? Is he just a man? Is he some other form of holy being? Like, can you pray to Jesus? And not in just an abstract sense, but like a saint or something like that, but as somebody you can actually pray to. And like, that was one of the key debates of the Unitarian controversy, with folks like the deists and the transcendentalists, and the far liberal theologians who were saying like, no, Jesus was just a man, to the more, I mean, conservative in this sense is still really liberal, but the more conservative side, where they're saying, no, Jesus is a holy being unto himself. that like you have people like I mean, even you could consider Nestorians who believe that that God was separate from Jesus, but God had a holy being and a mortal soul in one. And so you'll find people talking about like that. And so it's this weird thing that was never settled.
Yeah, theological inside baseball there.
It really is. I mean, when you read some of these things, it's first of all, it's boring. Nobody cares. Like the average, like it sounds like, oh well, the fundamental thing of Christianity is the Holy Trinity, and we are challenging it. And like thousands of people have died for this cause, and like sure, yeah. But when suddenly it's like, okay, talk about it all you want, we're not going to screw with you anymore, then it suddenly doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I am of the I think most people understand this, that most people are very religiously and theologically illiterate in the modern age, and I think for most of history, most have been theologically and religiously illiterate. You know, it's not the average person's concern, and so it all just sounds like inside baseball, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, especially when you start talking about like anything beyond just like
Jesus loves you.
Oh God.
At least that's what all ecumenism turned modern Christianity into.
Yeah, which is such a flaccid form of Christianity. It removes so much of the rhetorical and communicative power of the church. It becomes just about like, you know,
it's become
spreading a message that rather than becoming part of a community.
Well, it's about creating an identity. That's what it is. It's the identity. It's all about Christian identity at this point, you know, and all in response to 20th century secularism.
Yeah, well, but there's also like, because at least when we talk about these like weird esoteric, you know, like are Unitarians like, you know, technically polytheists because they think that Jesus is also a deity and things like that, and like that kind of esoteric talk, while never being solved, still lends the church power in recruitment and coherence. Whereas this whole like Jesus loves you kind of thing is you know, one of the easiest ways of kind of screwing with somebody who. There was a thing at Cal Poly called the oh crap, I forgot the name of them. But they were actually like called the Crusaders. And they were a huge, you know, evangelical group on campus. I accidentally ran into a concert for them where I was like, oh cool, there's a rock concert on the friggin' on Dexter Lawn as I'm going home, and it's like I'll just go into this. I move into the back of the crowd. People fill in behind me. They start playing, and it's all a praise Jesus stuff. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong place. My skin's starting to burn. And like, I turn around, and there's like just packed the entire Dexter Lawn. It's this, you know, long lawn. Was packed, and I had to like wade through all of these people, and I'm just like, I am in the wrong place. It's a very agriculture school, so a lot of the Aggies are going to, you know, be that way. But they always were trying to recruit people, and so they'd be out in front of like the quad or in front of the student union or anything along those lines, and be trying to recruit people, and you know, do you have Jesus in your life, kind of thing. And one of the easiest thing is like, well, if God loves everybody, why do I need to join you? It's like, you just well, if God loves everybody, then there's no point in your existence. Bye. So there needs to be some sort of exclusionary power, because otherwise you kind of eliminate the entire purpose of your religion, and that's what happened to the UUs.
Yeah, like I could say, like from the perspective of coming from a more conservative denomination, what they look at these more liberal Christian denominations, it's like the more liberal Christian denominations, you know, they accept all of the, you know, progressive social issues and whatnot. They accept many of the economic things as well. And what ends up coming from the perspective of the more conservative denominations is that then what's the difference between being a liberal atheist and a liberal Christian? You've it's like from the perspective of a conservative Christian, it's like you've abandoned all the doctrines that make you different than an atheist. You just want to feel good about yourself. And you're using the guise of church to do that.
Yeah, but the difference being with like Unitarians is that they still identified as Christian. They still had, they still believed that Jesus existed. You know, whether or not they believed in his divinity or anything, they still believed in a God. But the problem is, you keep letting that one core thing go, and it keeps slipping away and slipping away and slipping away until nothing. And that's basically what happened when spiritualism came in. You know, when you have people who are believing in like seances and mesmerism and all these kinds of wackadoodle things, the coherence of the church starts to fall apart if that is allowed, because it starts to eat away at that core. And that's what happened with Unitarians. One of the things that I didn't get to talk about, and one commenter said, let me pull up the comment because it was really good. RV Vagabond Jerry brought up the subject of the merger between Unitarians and Universalists, where in 1961 the Unitarians were like hurting, and they needed money, they needed a drive for membership, and so they merged with the Universalists, who had always been kind of like what's the commonest term? Fellow travelers. Yeah. They'd always been basically fellow travelers. The whole idea of universalism is that nobody's going to hell. You know, it is the core of the God loves everybody kind of thing. But they still believe in Jesus as they're still Trinitarians, right? They believe in the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. But they don't believe in exclusion. And still having that core belief was enough to hold them together. They were actually a smaller denomination than Unitarians in 1961, but Unitarians were like just accepting anyone, so it's not like they were an explicit group. And Universalists, while having liberalized their doctrine quite a bit, still had that you know, core Trinitarian thing. But and that was kind of the thing was like, oh well, you're gonna have to, you know, accept that people in the church will not believe in the Trinity if you merge with Unitarians. But it was more about money than something that like I didn't get to talk about, was that the Unitarian Church was bankrupt as heck. I'd gone through several bankruptcies, and they needed money. And they basically used Universalists to get a new cash flow.
Oh boy! See, yeah,
and then Universalism just ceased to exist. Like, I mean, the Unitarians just ran them over. Like it like obviously when you're all accepting, and then you bring in somebody who is somewhat exclusive in some way, but then you're bringing them into this thing that's all accepting. Of course, they're going to get overrun by everything else. But nobody identifies as a universalist anymore, and that's that's the weird thing about UUs that I didn't get to talk about is like, and that's also the reason why I focused on Unitarians, is because they basically are the ones who matter here. They did not get overrun. They were the larger denomination. They were the ones who had all the power prior to the Civil War. It's like all these things, and yet the sad thing about that merger in 1961 is that the people who were coming in to basically save the Unitarians got ran over by the Unitarians.
See, part of that, what you're talking about, watering down the belief system in order to get the more people on board. I just put another picture in my little file for the Google file. Should be the first one. It's of a meme from a meme page on Facebook called Confessional Weeaboo Memes.
So I think I can. Can I just? I think I can screen share that. Hold on. Let me figure out how to do that in this. Nope, I can't screen. Oh no, it's over here. Cool.
It should be in the Lutheran file. This came from a meme page, and it reminded me of
This is the meme.
Yeah, of sacrificing beliefs to grow your group. When you find the secret to easily grow your congregation with one simple trick. That's right, I'll sacrifice God.
Whoa, stop. And yeah, it kind of is what happens. They literally sacrificed the Trinity to join the Unitarians, and the Unitarians had long since destroyed like any semblance of coherent theology. And man, I am just ragging on Unitarians, aren't I?
Well, you don't have as, I don't think you're practicing anymore, so you don't have as much need to feel to defend them or anything like that.
I guess, but it's just, and again, I quit for a reason.
Yeah.
I hated going to church. But I mean, I appreciate what it taught, but like, and honestly, I kind of feel, I saw a lot of comments talking about like people like, talking about how parents shouldn't force their kids to go to church or anything like that. It's like, it's about instilling a sense of community. And like that is far more important than, being able to play video games at home.
And I find the idea saying parents shouldn't force their kids to do X is kind of like saying parents shouldn't force their kids to go to bed on time. Parents shouldn't force their kids to eat or bathe or anything. It's like, it's part of, I guess, a mental hygiene, I think, is a good thing church does for younger people. It's like a mental or spiritual hygiene in a way. But no, that's coming from a perspective of someone who still goes.
Yeah. I respect those who do, and I mean, while I'm an agnostic, I'm not like, I use the term agnostic because atheist implies a whole different set of things where you're like vehemently anti-religion. I'm not.
Oh yeah, that's the new atheists with, the gospel according to Dawkins, Evans, and Harris.
I mean, I get the whole internet atheist thing. Like, especially when it was in its heyday back in like 2012. And especially like just the myth busting and and I mean, like Bill Nye was a prominent one of these people. And
yeah.
Yet that whole movement took a really nasty turn after Gamergate.
Yeah, well, strange bedfellows in times of war.
Well, it's also it's one of those things where you've found your it's like Unitarians, for instance. Well, I am comparing the alt-right to the Unitarians. That's bad. But but with Unitarians, you have this like liberalism at its core, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, you believe in liberty so much that there's nothing to keep you together. And with like atheism and how it spawned these rational skeptics, TM, copyright, brand title.
Yeah.
These that was still at its core, because internet atheism was founded on hating on other groups. It was founded as a hate group, basically, not one that's unrighteous. I mean, everybody hates Nazis.
Well, yeah.
There's plenty of justified hate. But when you have a movement that is insular and talking to itself about, look how stupid these other people are, as soon as they find something else to go after that seems to be part of that. And while there certainly was that declension of we're going after Christians, now we're going after SJWs. You have the crazy right wings, these SJWs, and then you have the other ones who were Bill Nye and that, who were part of that initially, and then as it started going further and further right, he moved left, and so there were those kinds of things. Another example would be like Miles Power, if you know him, who, or Creationist Cat. I've been watching some of those videos where it's this like jokey, clearly started off as like a anti-theist or atheist.
One of your many amazing atheist copycats, or Thunderfoots.
Yeah, but then as Thunderfoot and Amazing Atheists started going after SJWs, they started going after the craziness that was. So that whole community went through the same problem, and much more rapidly. Obviously, it didn't take half a century, but the internet moves things rather quickly.
Ooh, yeah.
But I mean, that's the same. It's the problem with having that like fundamental core issue that has something that can easily challenge it.
See,
one of the powerful things about like Lutherans or any kind of Christian doctrine is that it doesn't really have a core. There's the Bible, but the Bible is quite literally multiple books, and there's a lot of dissonance between those books. I often like to describe how like the Bible has all these different translations through Chinese legalism, even though it sounds really weird application. It makes sense. The whole idea of Chinese legalism is that you create laws that are self-contradictory and then you arbitrarily enforce them. So you are always doing something against the law. None shall walk, none shall run. Well, what the hell am I supposed to be doing? Power walking? Well, it's up to the dictator to decide. And that arbitrary rule is the foundation of Chinese legalism, but it's also kind of the way interpreting the Bible works in many ways. There's a lot of passages that you can play against each other and choose what you want to emphasize.
Yeah. Though I think there's fewer contradictions than most internet atheists want to point out. You have an internet atheist takes a quick look at Leviticus and thinks, haha, I have found a way to stump you silly Christians. You're eating pork, but Leviticus says you're not allowed to. It's like, Well, actually, the Apostle Paul gives this explanation in the epistles as, yes, these animals are now clean because Jesus has died and come back to life, etc., etc.
Well, that's often a lot of the. I mean,
yeah,
there's a long debate about like how much of the Old Testament counts anymore. It's one of the interesting things that I haven't seen a lot of pushback on from Christians with all this, like, you know, putting the 10 Commandments somewhere, because for a long time the 10 Commandments were considered to be one of those things of like, yeah, well, we've got better stuff in the New Testament.
Well, within Christian theology, there's this understanding of the laws in the Old Testament are divided between the ceremonial laws and the moral laws. The ceremonial laws was stuff like circumcision or not eating pork or shellfish or not wearing like clothes of mixed fabrics or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then there's the moral laws, which is the stuff like, you know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. And like even the stuff about homosexuality was considered part of the moral law. While
yeah, but there's also the whole thing about idolatry.
Mm-hmm. The idolatry is also part of one of those.
That with Lutherans, that was very clearly, you know, like this is an important issue. But like the reason why they found it to be such an important issue is that it was disregarded by the Catholic Church.
It's funny. It's unlike a lot of other Protestants that try to strip their churches bare of any kind of religious imagery. Lutherans are not actually like that. Like no. Luther's concern for, you know, like engraven images was not that it was inherently against, you know, the first commandment or however you're numbering the commandments, thou shalt have no other gods. It's that he was fearful that it could lead to someone worshiping the thing instead of the thing it's representing itself. So that's more the Lutheran concern, is like, it's not the engraven image that's the problem. It's you, the person who's worshiping the graven image, that's the problem, kind of thing. But that's more inside baseball, I think.
Amazia Jodo, who is Melanchthon? I don't know even. Oh, that's German, probably. Melanchthon. I don't know who that is.
Well, I guess, do we want to go to answering comments in the chat, or?
Yeah, we have been neglecting them for a while. Sorry, guys. Have any questions for us?
Oh, apparently someone here thinks you're married.
What?
Some guy, Christian Vibrict. Cypher, is your wife/children religious?
I'm not married.
Did you just assume his parental status? Vibrict.
Did you just assume my parentals? I've actually never heard somebody say, like, did you just assume, like, at least like that. I mean, I'll often say, like, I love screwing with commenters who will say something along the lines of, like, oh, like the 13 Hours episode where I'll have a lot of people who will be like, oh, you're just a Hillary supporter. It's like, I didn't vote for Hillary. Actually, I think one person was like, I bet $1 million this guy voted for Hillary, and I just immediately commented, you owe me $1 million. And so I'll often say, as my drill sergeant liked to say, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. All right, so I think we have a few. Are we more Kantian? Religion is good for its moral utility. I don't think that's really Kantian. But that would definitely be utilitarian. But Kantianism is directly opposed to utilitarianism. The categorical imperative is its own moral standard. And I would definitely be a deontologist myself, as opposed to a utilitarian. But I do see the utility in religion, sure.
Yeah, I am a believer, so I'm more along the lines of it actually is spiritually useful, not just for this world, but for the world after. But, you know, that's the natural difference that's going to come from this.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about like how religion creates community. And that's something not only good but necessary. Something will fill its place if everybody's atheist. And as we've seen with the internet, that can be a bad thing if something's replacing it. You know, you get toxic fandoms and anti-SJWs and all this kind of stuff, you know, basically reactionaries masquerading as some sort of community of rational people.
Yeah.
So why did I take off comments on the Death of Stalin video? Because there is a comments response video. Go to that. What's your take on Adorno and Marxist tradition in the West? I'm not so much a fan of Adorno, but there was another person from the Frankfurt School. I'm forgetting his name. Let me look him up. I just typed in Frankfurt, as if that makes a difference. But he died trying to escape the Nazis. Give me names. Trying to remember it. Either way, he wrote Arcades. I don't remember Arcades book. Marxist.
Well, quick question after that, I guess, while you're looking at that. Which state do you live in? As a British person, I find American Christianity fascinating. And for that, California, but not the part of California you're thinking of. And probably not that other part either.
Which comment are we talking
about? Someone right below the one you're...
which state do you live in?
Yeah. So yeah, California, but not the part you're thinking of, or the other part you're thinking of. It's the part you're not thinking of. Have you ever eaten an almond? I've probably driven by it.
Contributed to the carbon dioxide going into it. I also was from California for a while myself. I was born in San Luis Obispo, then I moved to Nevada to grow up, and then I went back to SLO for my master's, and now I am in New Mexico in Albuquerque. So let's see here. What's the next one? Do you think losing the faith in the West is concerning, or at least curious enough to see where it goes? So Gum Duquin is basically referring to you know, this steady rise in agnosticism and atheism. And as an agnostic myself, I don't find it that much concerning, though I do find it disconcerting that there is such a animosity to churchgoers and such animosity to other religions, that like there's this really well, I mean, that's what atheist means, anti-theist. And this is this trend of hating on these folks who oftentimes they might not even be that religious themselves. They're just going to church. But like that is concerning because it infuses this whole hate engine within our discourse, and as I've been pointing out for a little bit in here, the whole anti-SJW group is infused with that very hate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as a Lutheran yourself,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, it's once again, it is overall concerning, but the long-term perspective of, I think, most more traditionally conservative Christian and denominations is that, we're going to win in the end. The book already says we're going to. Like, the Bible already says we're going to win in the end. So, it's just a matter of waiting it out.
Yeah,
And
if the apocalypse comes, I'm screwed.
yeah, the funny thing is that with Christian history, you look at the history of the Christianity and you realize the branches of Christianity that survive are the ones that dig in their heels to not accommodate other religious belief systems. Like, imagine if what Christianity had done that during its early years and during the Roman Empire. They would have just been absorbed into the Roman pantheon and there would be no Christianity.
Yeah.
Christ would just be another god among many.
Yeah, and there'd be, I mean, the fact is monotheism has this power to absorb. As a obviously polytheism has this power to absorb, but it's not just a power to absorb, but a power to control. Because a lot of religion is about not about answering fundamental things or anything like that. And while I've alluded many times to the power of community in that, it's the power to organize a community, to have some sort of shared values, but that's control. It's a hierarchy. It is by definition a means of exerting power. Now I think that power is unavoidable, and we just need to choose the best systems of power we possibly can. And I think, at least in modern society, religion's pretty benign. Of all tumors we could choose, I would prefer that. But you need an opiate of the masses, as Marx would say. You need something like that. You can't just get rid of it. When the Soviet Russia was created, there was actually several movements to create a state religion that was the workers' religion. There was, in fact, Stalin started with a cultural revolution, and a key component of that was replacing religion. And by the way, Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, totally based on that. 30 years prior. But the point being, we need this in some way, and it's not something that we can just get rid of.
Yeah, nature abhors a vacuum, all that stuff.
Yeah, one of the key things that people like to talk about is well, without religion, we wouldn't have as many wars. And it's really?
We find reasons to fight all the time.
I mean, I study American violence, and hardly anything I can point to is based on religion. Religion is always playing backseat to these things. The justification of God is on our side always comes after the war starts.
Yeah, well, or you get my favorite of quote-unquote religious wars, the 30 Years' War, where you have the Catholic French aiding the Protestant Bohemians against Catholic Austrians, who are also fighting alongside Protestant Swedes. And
you also have to look at the war in stages, because obviously if you're just looking at the last stage, it is not about religion at all. I mean, look at the Crimean War. The Crimean War starts off like it should be clearly, man, my light is blurring me too much. The Korean War starts, I mean, not the Korean, the Crimean War starts off about religion. It's about who controls holy sites in the Black Sea. But it turns into who controls the Black Sea?
Or if you're super cynical, you say the latter is what you're looking for an excuse. It's like, oh hey, look, look, the keys to the Holy Sepulchre. Whose do those belong to?
So, Gum Gum Duke Quinn, who we've been answering the question thus far, is basically proposing his philosophy as a replacement to religion. But my problem with that is it really necessary to replace? Is it like, do we want Plato's Republic?
Yeah, I guess one of the other big things with religion that it has provided is that it's, well, and I think this is part of the community thing where it provides something that's bigger than yourself is a big thing I think a lot of people are always looking for. And that's where a lot of political ideologies try to fulfill that kind of thing, with your various forms of Marxism saying, class is your God and Marx is your prophet or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, and they try to draw a one-to-one equivalence, and it's unnatural. Religion forms naturally. It's not something that's imposed immediately. It is something that's imposed eventually, but it's not something, Jesus didn't, from the cross, like, rip his hand off and go, you over there are now the Pope, and you over there are, the next bishop of Antioch, and you two will have to fight out who is in control. After I'm gone, I'm out. That's not how religion is formed. And so these kinds of like, let's replace religion with this. I mean, that's why we talk about like toxic fandom and just like deciding canon in terms of these fandoms, like, does J.J. Abrams' Star Trek count? And to me, no.
Well, sure, unless you're an Abramite.
The actual Abramites, that's what they were frickin' fighting over. It wasn't over like whether or not frickin' Cain killed Abel. But these are forming organically as kind of a replacement for that. But we also see the inherent problem, right, with toxic fandom, and that is that that you're replacing it but not making it better.
Yeah, not much else to add on top of that. So let's see if there are other questions.
I saw Knowing Better in the comments earlier. He just put out an episode today about eschatology. And I did an episode a while back on, what is the end of history in that. And the point of his episode is kind of like that standard, sorry, I got a fly in here, or a gnat. But is that there is like a, there's a lot of silliness when it comes to eschatology. A lot of silliness. But also, he misses a fundamental point in there. I don't know if he's still. Are you still here, man?
Yep.
I'm guessing not. But he misses a fundamental aspect of it. Is the more rational explanations of eschatology. Like, for instance, millennialism, where it's just like, we will make a utopia, and that's. There is this fundamental difference between, apocalypse and utopia, but like there's also more rational views of the apocalypse. global warming and you know, like all these different things, like, you know, an asteroid can end. There's all these ways the world can end, and we've come damn close to killing ourselves, especially with nuclear weapons. I mean, I did an episode a long time ago about how like close we've come, and it's actually kind of scary because it's we are incredibly stupid people. And
oh yeah, a flock of seagulls in Russia could cause World War III.
Yeah, and if World War III starts with actual nukes, like if nukes start flying, I mean, it's Mad Max. That like the oceans will dry up, we'll all die of radiation poisoning, this planet will become dead. And it doesn't take that many nukes to fly either. You know, like some people will point out there was all this testing going on. There's been over 500 nukes done atmospherically. The difference being none of them were the same as our current thermonuclear arsenal. They're all much smaller yield. You know, the Tsar Bomba is like a fifth of our standard ICBM.
Yeah, well, I guess the upside to a nuclear apocalypse is the BDSM gear market will just explode. Apparently, that's what everyone wears then.
And man, freaking guitar playing gets so much better. So, I think we should wrap this up in about, like, I don't know, 15 minutes. Sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good here.
All right, so let's take one more question. We'll see if we have enough time after that. Let's see here. Haven't had any. Can't keep on answering the same questions from Gungam Duke. And
see, I think there's some towards the more recent, but then you see more Gum.
Sorry, man. We've answered 2 of your questions already. Let's bring somebody else. Oh, what videos are you working on right now? Hardly any, to be honest. But I make a bunch of videos prior to the semester, and just work the crap out of them during the summer, and then our Grant and my video, I had the script written in like August, right?
Yeah, I think we got somewhere there in August.
Yeah, and really it was just I had most of it edited. I just hadn't done the camera work. Like that camera work was recorded like only like 2 weeks prior. But otherwise, most of it was done before even the beginning of the semester. So I have a bunch of stuff ready to go. It's all over the place. Like next week, I am planning on releasing one on what is the meaning of stars on flags. Then I think I might go with E.P. Thompson the next video, and then veterans history, and then I have a diatribe on Battlefield 5 that I want to release the week prior to its release. Because oh boy, there's been a lot of freaking stupid controversy around that one. But
see.
Let's see here. I think we have enough to, well, do you want to say what you have brewing?
Well, I guess while you're looking for a question, I've got a video coming out on Tuesday about political toxicity and the history behind the current, or at least what I think to be the answer behind current political toxicity. Then, of course, there's another video in the pipeline about how to cite your sources like a historian, so more of a how-to. And then I got one on the fall of the Ottoman Empire. I hope to get out around November 11th, if not maybe a day after. Not exactly sure at the top of my head, but that's what I have in the pipeline at the moment.
Somebody points out that I had a Hull patent on the show long before I revealed my name. Yes. Let's see here. If you ever need help, well, that's looking for questions. Oh, here's one. Sorry that this has been asked before, but do either of you watch YouTube in your free time? And if so, what are some of your favorite channels? This is asked by Arrow1 Nakni.
So, YouTube in spare time? Yes. A lot of spare time is spent with YouTube, largely just to study the current landscape. And, I don't need to learn things all the time. Sometimes you just want to watch something that's just pure entertainment.
Just watch some Dude Perfect or something.
Yeah.
Like I watch a lot of YouTube actually. I watch something like 2 or 3 hours a day. Although admittedly, it kind of ebbs and flows. By the way, if anybody wants to ask, it's Grangestone and best bang for your buck in terms of scotch. Anyways, so I watch, I think my subscriptions are something like 400. Obviously, you won't see that on this channel. I subscribe to explicitly historical channels on this channel. But obviously I don't only watch history stuff. But it's super wide and varied, and that's kind of what I love about YouTube, is that I don't need to watch just freaking history content, especially with like what I do. I end up skipping a lot of other history YouTubers because it's just like, I've been reading too much history today. I don't want it anymore.
Ooh, yeah, know that feeling. See, other people. I like a lot of the media analysis type people. Your Quentin reviews, your Lindsay Ellis's.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I like a lot of Lefty Tube too. And Lindsay Ellis is kind of starting to be Lefty Tube.
She's on that borderline between media analysis and left tube.
Especially once she kind of severed her connection with
the Channel
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. And I definitely like the Nostalgia Critic. Hell, I fell asleep last night watching his review of Transformers. That's another thing. I also use YouTube to fall asleep sometimes. But I like a lot of that kind of media analysis stuff. Somebody mentions history buffs. I watch that, and yes, I know about his Death of Stalin video. But it's actually kind of interesting how he and I can have such differing opinions and yet not really have any different view of the movie itself, of like the objective view of the movie. But he's much more forgiving of movies than I am. My loyalty is to the history. But the there's also ContraPoints and those kind of lefty channels. H Bomber Guy, freaking, and I can't name any of these channels off the top of my head.
I've dabbled in ContraPoints a bit myself, and if you're looking for a new area, like I watch some religiously oriented YouTube channels, and one of them is actually more of kind of a religion comedy type thing, a channel called Lutheran Satire, and their tagline is "Teach the faith by making fun of stuff." And so he's done things like making fun of like the charismatics through the use of Star Wars. C-3PO crashes on Earth in a Pentecostal church, and they're trying to speak tongues, and then C-3PO is like, You're not speaking any actual human languages. That's what the gift of tongues is. You're just speaking French-sounding gibberish or whatnot. And if you're interested in religious humor, I'd say check out Lutheran satire.
I don't actually watch a lot of comedy channels. There's like, I do like some, like I used to love Saturday Night SMBC Theater or something like that. Or Sam Harris. I can't remember the guy's name. It's just, it's his name. But the otherwise, I normally don't watch like skit channels and that. I don't know, just not my thing. Although college humor, definitely college humor.
Oh yeah, college humor can be, a lot of good stuff there.
Or Explosum.
Yes.
Cyanide and Happiness. That is great, though they seem to be having financial troubles.
Well, yeah.
But I think a lot of the comedy on YouTube is more about like how you're using the comedy, because like we all try to make jokes in our videos as well. I'm not like I can never write comedy. I always find it in the edit, and even there it can be pretty callous.
Yeah.
If I want just dumb fun, yeah, Knowing Better says fail. I love Fail Army. The Fail Army. I found them because I was looking up stupid clips of like army fails. And like that's actually how they started. Was like where their first breakout hit was just of U.S. Army fails or military fails or something along those lines. Like that's what got me into their channel, and that was way before they broke out. And well, I think they repeat stuff a bit too much. It's still just good dumb fun.
Oh yeah. Just nothing like watching a guy get hit in the crotch over and over again.
Okay, so your at least revolutionary mindset is admitting that he's a troll. Yeah, he had a long string of comments of like, "Are you gay?" Like, no. Why are you asking? But the let's see here. What other kind of dumb fun is there that like, or just educational content that we don't like? That's not history.
See, well, CGP Grey is great when he actually uploads something.
The Vlogbrothers in general, like I don't care about like what's happening in their life or anything. Like they seem like great people and all that, but like I don't care. I don't watch Casey Neistat or any of the vloggers. But what they do, where it's a bunch of different kind of like, here's a PSA on voting. Like I like that. And there used to be a lot more channels like that where they were kind of vlogs, but also kind of educational. I originally envisioned my channel to do that. But started going more and more on like history. So the those kinds of things. Then there's also, of course, the proliferation of science content. There's just so much. The SciShow was actually the dare that made me start this channel, was because I was complaining like, why is there a SciShow and no history show? And it's like, well, then you do it. Like, fine. Um, but let's see here. We're running out of time here. So, is there any channel you would like to point out for people to go to?
Let's see. Any channel I want to point out. I would have been able to answer this if you hadn't asked.
Well,
Yeah.
I have one that's fairly important. Your channel. Everybody here go to The Casual Historian. Check out his video. It's linked in the description. It's the video on Lutherans. Be sure to subscribe and check out some other videos of his.
Oh, thank you very much for that. And I tell people to subscribe to you, but I'm assuming they already are if they're here.
Yeah. Hopefully you're getting a good bump, and I saw that there were a few people who were making the jump, so hopefully we'll get some more folks.
Yeah.
It's a great channel, and especially like you're starting to do those like historian essentials things. Like the last one I was expecting, like when he said centrism, I was like, wait, is he going to talk about like political centrism? And then you know, talk about Eurocentrism, and then it's like, yeah, this is important. Yeah. So definitely go and check him out. We've been on for 2 hours, so we're gonna call it good here.
Yep. All right.
It'll be up, and I'll be in the comments for a while. So I'll see you guys there.
All right.
Bye.
All right. See ya.